All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something absolutely fascinating. We are going to decode exactly how experimental charter cities act as literal shields for mobile global capital. We're looking at this super interesting concept called jurisdictional buffers, and we're going to examine it through a massive real-world test case, the Prospera precedent.
So think about this for a second. Where exactly does global capital go when a nation just changes its rules overnight? It's a critical question, right? Because when traditional nation-states suddenly introduce heavy regulatory burdens, high taxes, or just severe political instability, liquid assets and top-tier talent become incredibly vulnerable. They need somewhere safe and fast.
And we are not talking about small change here. The stakes are literally in the billions. Billions of dollars in highly mobile capital. Right now, there is a massive international arbitration claim unfolding at the World Bank's ICSID tribunal, pitting a private charter city called Prospera against the Republic of Honduras. To really grasp how we got to this intense showdown, we actually need to talk about factory automation first. Stick with me, I promise it'll make perfect sense.
Okay, moving right into Section 1, the LIFO buffer metaphor. Let's look at some industrial buffering.
To understand global capital flows, looking at manufacturing really grounds the concept. Imagine a production line, say a machine. Actually, let's just say a downstream conveyor belt suddenly jams up and stops. You definitely don't want to panic and shut down the entire upstream factory. That's exactly where a LIFO buffer kicks in. LIFO stands for last in, first out, and it's a physical or virtual queue designed purely to temporarily hold items and manage those unexpected bottlenecks.
You see this all the time in high-speed food packaging or circuit board assembly. They use these wild physical systems, things like Giraffe vertical stacking towers, BAT spiral chains, or Heliflex accumulation systems. They safely hold products in a queue, and the absolute second the line starts moving again, boom, the buffer reverses direction. It discharges the most recently stored items first, last in, first out.
Which brings us to Section 2, Charter Cities as Buffers.
This is where it gets incredibly cool. How do those factory mechanics translate into modern geopolitics? Well, compare legacy states with charter cities. Traditional nation-states operate on a FIFO model, first in, first out. They are totally bogged down by centuries of legal backlog, rigid codes, and what the source texts literally call regulatory gunk. But charter cities? They act as these clean LIFO nodes. By offering dynamic, independent municipal charters, they are completely free from historical friction. They push a fresh, optimized version of the law right to the top of the stack.
It's a brilliant parallel. In industrial automation, physical products flow into the buffer during a breakdown and flow out when things are fixed. In geopolitical arbitrage, the inflow, that last-in piece, is global capital, talent, and businesses escaping all that state regulatory gunk. And because these assets are so incredibly liquid, the outflow, the first out, is triggered the exact second the host state gets politically unstable. Mobile capital literally acts just like a physical product in a factory buffer.
All right, let's look at how this works in practice with Section 3, Prospera's algorithmic administration.
We have the ultimate real-world stress test for this, Prospera. It's an autonomous ZD enclave located on the island of Roatan in Honduras. To completely bypass state bureaucracies, Prospera basically runs its governance like a tech company using an ERP, an enterprise resource planning platform. We're talking multi-currency accounting with real-time ledger and updates. It automatically distributes customs duties, tracks automated asset depreciation, and maintains these tamper-resistant, time-stamped logs for strict global audit compliance. It's corporate-grade administration with zero traditional red tape.
Which leads perfectly into Section 4, hardwiring private arbitration.
If you're going to build a jurisdictional buffer, you absolutely need rock-solid legal architecture. Check out this quote from Article 20 of the ZD Organic Law. It explicitly says these zones should make use of binding arbitration for all matters involving contracts or property. In most of the world, arbitration is just an optional clause you might throw into a deal. In Prospera, it is literally hardwired into the foundation. It's the default mechanism, even if your specific contract doesn't say a single word about it.
Now, there is a pretty common misconception out there that all private arbitration happens in total secrecy. Not true here. The Prospera Arbitration Center actually splits things into two distinct tracks. Sure, you have the private ADR track, confidential, streamlined, and perfect for quick resolutions under $250,000. But if you don't explicitly agree to that and pay a surcharge for the privacy, you automatically default to the public adjudicative track. That one is very court-like, it creates binding precedent from published decisions, and even features a full appeals tribunal for major claims.
Okay, time for the drama.
Section 5, the ICSID Treaty Showdown. Let's talk about the bottleneck. So what happens when the host state just abruptly changes the rules, essentially jamming up our downstream production line? You get a massive geopolitical bottleneck. The Honduran government decided to repeal the Zidane Organic Law, directly threatening Prosper's legal right to exist. Because of that extreme host state intervention, our LIFO buffer had to deploy its ultimate defensive mechanism. Prosper launched a massive, multi-billion-dollar international arbitration defense under the CAFTA-DR Free Trade Agreement. Let's trace this escalating timeline at the World Bank's ICSID tribunal. It all kicked off back in late 2022 with Prosper's formal filings. But fast forward to January 2026, Honduras requested to bifurcate the proceedings. Basically, that's a legal maneuver to separate jurisdictional arguments from the actual merits of the case, purely to delay things. Well, by April 2026, the ICSID tribunal firmly rejected that bifurcation request. This was a huge procedural win for Prospera, forcing Honduras to face the expropriation claims head-on. And that brings us to the July 2026 final deadline for amicus curiae submissions. The clock is absolutely ticking.
Finally, bringing it all together in Section 6, the future of sovereignty.
Why should we care about this architecture of international trust? Because the irony playing out right now is just incredible. In March 2026, right in the thick of aggressively fighting Prosper in court, Honduran President Nasri Asfoura officially signed the ICSID Convention. His public statement? He said, "It places us within the framework of predictability that international markets value and that investors require." Think about that for a second. Even while actively challenging a specific charter city, the host nation feels totally compelled to signal to the world that it still respects international contracts.
Which leaves us with a pretty massive provocative thought to chew on. Can software, algorithmic ERP administration, and private arbitration genuinely outmaneuver physical sovereign states? We've seen how charter cities act as these highly efficient LIFO buffers, catching and protecting capital when local rules suddenly shift. But as the Prospera precedent clearly proves, these experimental enclaves are still physically anchored to the land. They still heavily rely on legacy international treaties to fight off host nation friction. So what do you think? Will the clean, dynamic nodes of polycentric law ultimately win out, or will traditional nation-states always maintain absolute authority over their territory? Keep that in mind as you watch where global capital flows next. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.